Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, welcome. Some of you may not have seen me in a while now, so welcome back. Nice to see you again. I'm going to be making weekly recaps. I wish I could do them more often, but the truth is I can't. For those of you who haven't been tuning in the past year, I have started my second master's degree in science this time, and it's incredibly time consuming. And obviously it's going alongside working and maintaining my YouTube channel. So timing is a lot more strict than it was back in 2020 when I had a lot of spare time in my hands because we were all in lockdown. Having said that, I am active on social media again. I talk about this case throughout the day. So if I'm not making a video, I'm most definitely talking about it. You all know where to find me. So for those of you who are new, very briefly, I am a lawyer based in Australia. You can refer to me as Pluto. And 2 years ago, I started this channel, and along the way, found Johnny's case, and the rest is history. We did take a bit of a hiatus because the UK case was over, and I was feeling incredibly burnt out. But here we are, refreshed and strong, and ready to tackle the next 5 weeks ahead of us. So the structure of this video will be, I will summarize what happened during week 1. Now, please bear in mind that this is a summary because all of the footage of every single day is available on YouTube for you to watch. So the structure will be, we'll cover what happened during the trial, and then at the end, we can discuss briefly, and I will be voicing some thoughts and opinions on what has happened over each week. Starting off with the opening statements. Before I get there, I do have to say that throughout day 1, day 2, maybe not day 3, but the first 2 days, Amber looked completely spooked to me. She looked uncomfortable and completely not in her element. And to me, that was in stark contrast to the photos that we saw from the UK when she would enter and leave the courtroom every day. She looked quite confident, smug. We all almost knew what the verdict was going to be. I'm not saying that she knew, but there was this sense of she knew that things would go her way. This trial is very different. She is now sitting in the defendant's seat. She's not just a witness, and she knows it. It's very clear on her face that she knows it. The opening statements from Johnny's side were delivered by Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez. So Benjamin went up first, and he opened up by telling the jury a little bit of a brief background of Johnny's professional history. So his reputation, how his name has always been attached to box office success for decades. And fast forward to today, his name is now associated with a lie. They went through the 3 statements that they would like the jury to focus on that emanate from Amber's op-ed published in the Washington Post in December of 2018. He urged the jury to focus on the timeline, on the wording 2 years ago. So stemming back from 2018 to 2016. He then connected that timeline of 2 years ago to May 2016 when Amber showed up at court with a mark on her face. He mentioned that Amber never named Johnny because she didn't have to. You know, we've discussed this so extensively on this channel. You don't have to name Johnny Depp in order for the world to understand exactly who she was married to. Everyone in Hollywood and beyond knew. And Ben made a point to the jury to remember this fact. He tells the jury that Amber made up a story that was initially designed to keep Johnny, because she could see and feel him slipping through her very fingers. He was going to leave. In fact, he showed up on that fateful night on the 21st of May to ask for a divorce or to inform her of his intention to divorce her. When her plan to keep him failed, She redesigned it and then proceeded to recast herself as his victim. Ben mentioned to the jury how Amber's lawyers threatened Johnny with allegations of abuse if he didn't bow down to all of Amber's financial demands. This happened before she showed up in court, by the way. So let's remember the timeline here. Johnny refused to give in to these demands, and then Miss Heard, as they refer to her in the trial, shows up with a mysterious mark on her face. The fact that the restraining order was obtained on an ex parte basis, which means that the other side was absent. Johnny was not there with his lawyer to have a chance to be heard. It was obtained just based on Amber's words. And you'll see that this is a recurring theme in this case. From the witnesses that we have listened to throughout week 1, everything was based on what Amber had told them. They talked about how in 5 decades, and Johnny's almost 6 decades now, but by the time this all started, in his 50 plus years on this planet, has never once been accused of harming a woman. Camille talked about how he was a kind soul who, from a very young age, had to learn how to coexist with an abusive woman, being his mother, Betty Sue, who abused her husband in very much the same manner that Amber Heard treated Johnny. And much like his father, Johnny was a peaceful, kind, quiet soul who just either learned how to take it or retreat, run away. You'll hear his sister testify, Christine, that that's what they did every time their parents fought. They ran away to hide. And that's a reaction that never left Johnny. Then they talked about how Amber is a profoundly troubled and manipulative person. They talked about how she was the one who pursued him on the set of the Rum Diaries in 2009. And initially, Johnny didn't think it was a good idea because of the vast age difference between them. But she pursued him hard until eventually he gave in and fell madly in love with her. They talked about how as time passed, after she nailed him, the mask started to slip and her true colors started to surface. They informed the jury that they will hear from witnesses, including Dr. Anderson, a psychologist who treated the couple. Was she a psychologist or a psychiatrist? A mental health professional, essentially, who treated the couple. Talk about how Amber had severe abandonment issues and would rather physically strike Johnny than let him leave, because that's what he would do. As per Amber's own words, as we all heard in the recording, he would split, and that would make her go crazy. It was mentioned to the jury that they will see and hear evidence that will directly contradict Amber's ever-changing story, because her story since 2016 has only gotten more dramatic, with more and more incidents being added along the way. Now, an important element of defamation is that the false statements must have had or are incredibly likely to have an incredibly negative effect on the plaintiff's reputation, livelihood, etc. And so Johnny's team informed the jury that the evidence will demonstrate to them how harmful, how poisonous Amber's op-ed has been, not only to Johnny's professional life, but his personal life as well, how his children have suffered. And then they touch on the photos, those infamous photos that I believe were instrumental in Amber's success in the UK, or I should say NGN's success. Johnny's team alert the jury that not a single photograph is the original copy. They're all copies, as the originals have somehow disappeared. Not only that, every single photo was stored in an editing software. And this is something great that they did, because we all knew that Amber's team was going to get on the drugs and alcohol narrative, because that's exactly what they did, even though it's a different team. That was exactly the strategy in the UK. And so Johnny's team said, you will hear that Johnny has substance abuse issues. You will hear he uses incredibly vulgar language that most of us probably wouldn't use. And he admits to that. But abusing substances and using vulgar language in no way means that he abuses human beings. To wrap things up, Camille tells the jury that what they will hear from Amber and her side will be horrific. But it's designed to be horrific. It's designed to shock them. It's designed to distract them from the truth. This is a woman who is obsessed with her image and her reputation. She is obsessed with advancing her career. But this isn't about the advancement of someone's career. This is about clearing a human being's name. A human being who up until this point, Amber's allegations surfaced, was known by everyone as a kind, giving, generous, peaceful, not perfect. No one is claiming Johnny Depp is perfect. He will be the first to tell you he's not. But someone who is loved worldwide, and it still is loved, but Hollywood execs, Hollywood studios, they don't care that allegations are false. They don't care that they know Johnny on a personal basis and know that it's not true. All they care about is not being associated with drama, not being associated with someone whose name is linked to such allegations, regardless of their veracity. And in the end, the jury was urged to assess the reliability and credibility of the evidence. Overall, even though they were reading off a piece of paper, their notes, which is obviously understandable, they made a lot of eye contact, and I believe that they had a human connection with the jury. You know, these things matter with advocacy. Lawyers were taught to know how to connect with the jury. You know, at the end of the day, everyone in that courtroom is human, and you cannot deny human connection and human emotions and the power of eye contact and the power of communication. And again, I think that Ben and Camille did a great job. So we start off with Rottenborn. Now, I have to say, when it comes to lawyers, a lot of the time, they're like a pet. They reflect their client's attitude and personality. This only applies, obviously, if the client went shopping for lawyers and picked one or picked a firm out to represent them. Not if one was assigned to them, not if one was obtained in a hurry. When a client chooses a particular lawyer, it tends to be because they're on a similar wavelength, and you can really see it playing out in this trial. You know, to me in my head, forgive me, you know, if this is a little bit childish, but I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter and the books, not Warner Brothers movies. And it's kind of like this Gryffindor Slytherin aura I'm getting, you know, good versus evil. I'm talking right down to the lawyers themselves. You know, Ben and Camille and everyone else on Johnny's team seem to genuinely be nice, good people. And it comes across in their attitude. Whereas, especially the Rottenborn dude, my goodness, he is an incredibly tough pill to swallow. He is very snarky. Just watching him was incredibly off-putting to me, not just as, you know, watching a lawyer perform. I'm talking as a human being. And I do wonder whether his attitude won't really, you know, have a good impact on the jury. Because he's just so, I mean, bitchy, really. I don't know what else to say. Now, in the opening statement, Amber was introduced as the lesser known person, immediately taking on the role of the underdog. This is why you must support her. You know, everyone knows Americans love an underdog. Or at least that's what, you know, internationally, that's what I've heard. So there's Johnny. He's super famous and powerful. He's the man in power that Amber wrote about in her op-ed. Whereas she's just sweet little Amber, blonde little sweet thing, came from the South. She's just, a girl from the South who built her own way, up through Hollywood, took on any role she could. She tried to support her parents as soon as she made money. Naturally, understandably, this is expected of her lawyers. They're trying to humanize her in the eyes of the jury. And they're not only that, they're trying to show that she is this good, hardworking, honest, salt of the earth woman who has only ever wanted to make a life for herself and her family. Honestly, I'm also going to warn you guys, this opening statement was entirely too long. It was way too long. They pretty much summarized all of the incidents. They really focused on the Australia one, for example, whereas Johnny's team, it was a very good overview of what the jury was to expect. But this one, I wouldn't be surprised if the jury started kind of zoning out at some point because it was just way too long to be engaging. At least that's to me, again, as a viewer. So my approach with this one is really going to be just picking out highlights. I'm not going to summarize it very thoroughly. So after introducing her, they focused on how this is about freedom of speech, which is ironic because they then go on and focus on drug use. So this is about freedom of speech and not about the soap opera that Johnny's team wants you to believe. So now they're painting Johnny's side as the theatrical, dramatic, unbelievable, fantastical story. They painted out Johnny as being obsessed with Amber, the one who refuses to move on, when all Amber ever wanted to do was move on and live her life. But Johnny just wouldn't let her. They claimed that Johnny could see that his career was floundering. It was going nowhere while Amber's star was rising, which is funny because to me, at least in 2016, that's not how I remember things. No one even knew who Amber Heard was. The only reason I knew about her was because she was in Magic Mike, Double XL or whatever, the second installment. And she caught my eye. But otherwise, honestly, and I'm not trying to be petty, this is very much like the Meghan Markle thing, like no one knew who you were until you met the guy who shot you up to worldwide fame. It's just a matter of fact. There's nothing wrong with being a nobody. I'm a nobody. But yeah, they're saying, oh, her star was rising and he was so jealous. He wanted to destroy her because he couldn't stand that she was at the start of this bright career, this bright future when he was looking at the end of his. But rather than blame himself for the demise of his career, he needed Amber as his scapegoat. They told the jury that all of his witnesses are his enablers. They're all on his payroll. They all want what's best for them. And what's best for them is if Johnny keeps making money and keeps working so that he can keep paying them. You'll see this come up as a recurring theme, even with his own sister. And again, old news, Yawnsville, this is exactly what happened in the UK. In relation to the op-ed specifically, and this is mostly from memory, they talked about how, Amber didn't even write the title. The very title. It's common practice that editors take care of this and they don't refer to the author of the body of the op-ed. And so she's not even responsible for that. And they could have sued the Washington Post, but they chose not to. Johnny chose not to because it's a personal vendetta. Which is ironic because that's the argument that Johnny's side is using for Amber's counterclaim. She tried to sue, she is suing Johnny for something or 3 statements that Adam Waldman said. They weren't even uttered by Johnny. But she still decided to countersue him without even naming Adam Waldman as a second defendant. They then go on to tell the jury that Amber was minding her own business, living her life, when the Washington Post reached out to her and said, hey, do you want to write an op-ed? She wasn't even looking to write this. She was asked to write it, and she said, yeah, sure. That's their story, of course. Now, that doesn't excuse defamation. It doesn't matter that you didn't instigate it. The fact that you wrote it is enough. And of course, even within the opening statement, there is a huge focus, humongous focus on Johnny's substance abuse issues. As if that automatically means that he most definitely was abusive towards a human being. At one point, Elaine refers to the photographs that are not in their original form. They're just copies and they've been edited. She actually says that every single phone, your iPhone, has editing capabilities. That doesn't mean that the photos are any less authentic. Now, I don't know if she's just completely oblivious to what editing means. You know, the fact that everyone has access to editing software doesn't make the issue any less worth mentioning to the jury. So what, are we to believe that because everyone's phone has editing capabilities, that means Amber's photos are authentic? It doesn't negate the fact that they could have been edited. I mean even simple editing, like, you know, upping the saturation, making whatever color on her face more vibrant, more eye-catching, making it look like it's a lot worse than it actually was. If it was makeup, as Johnny's side alleges, increasing the vibrancy of it to make it look like it was an injury. It's, you know, editing is editing. It doesn't matter that it's accessible as a software or as an option to everyone. And like I said, I'm going to wrap up their opening statements here. They go on and on. I mean, Elaine even says that Johnny's allegation that the tip of his finger was injured as a result of Amber throwing a vodka bottle at him is ludicrous, is impossible, is fantastical. When Johnny has actual evidence from the Gold Coast University Hospital that it was an injury of velocity, which means something coming at him in high speed. You can't do that to yourself. I mean, honestly, as someone who's been going through all the legal filings over the past couple of years, I mean, yes, I did take a hiatus for the last year or so, but I would check in every once in a while. And one hallmark of Amber's legal team is brevity does not exist to them. When it's a core concept when it comes to written submissions, you know, in the legal field, brevity, as much as possible. But to Elaine and her team, it's just whoosh. Brevity just goes out the window, and it really was reflected in their opening statement. And just the general vibe, like I said earlier, is incredibly hostile. And advocacy, you're meant to establish a connection with the jury. You're meant to almost, you know, you're meant to win them over, not almost. You are meant to win them over. Because if you all know about the Casey Anthony case, the evidence was overwhelmingly against Casey Anthony, but her defense team, her lawyers, specifically her main lawyer, that man, I don't know his name, was an excellent communicator. And that's what got Casey Anthony off, apart from the prosecution's incompetence as well. All right, I'm going to move on to our first witness, who was Johnny Depp's sister, Christi Dembrowski. Her examination in chief was really focused on initially painting a picture for the jury with regards to their childhood, how they grew up. Specifically, obviously, it was all leading up to his mother, Betty Sue. Christine described in great detail how her mother would behave and how peaceful their father was. Hearing her describe her father, this is the first time I'd ever heard anything about Johnny's father. It really made sense why Johnny is the way he is today. You know, why during his time with Amber, he was so passive, and not just passive, I suppose, accepting of the status quo. This is just how Amber is. This is just the way it is, you know. People who didn't grow up in an abusive dynamic or environment don't have that tolerance for the most part. It depends, of course, I'm generalizing. But when you look at his background, his childhood, which Christine did an excellent job of conveying to the jury, things click because he adored his mother. By all accounts, he worshipped her. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the opening statement, but Christine also talked about how she and Johnny, being the two youngest children in the family, would always run and hide whenever their parents would fight. And when I say their parents, it was Betty Sue going off at her husband, who, again, according to Christine, was an incredibly passive and peaceful man who just let her go. He just let her kind of release her steam and didn't do anything about it. Now, of course, Betty Sue wasn't just physical against her husband or towards her husband. This extended to all of her children, including Johnny Depp, her youngest. And Johnny, according to his sister Christine, never once retaliated. The most he would do is retreat. Go to his bedroom, go wherever he could to escape the wrath of his mother. But even as he got older, and this was specifically asked by Benjamin, even when he was an older child, a teenager, he never retaliated. He just let her do whatever she needed to do to let her anger out. And she was an incredibly angry person. Now, again, Christine's testimony was incredibly lengthy. But one more point of note in the examination in chief was how, as his personal manager, she would book him a separate room in a hotel every single time he traveled with Amber. And this is something that she specifically said she never had to do in his prior relationships. More importantly, this is not something that Johnny asked her to do. She just did it. She did it because she knew from his childhood and watching this relationship play out before her eyes as his older sister, she knew that he would need a place to escape, a place to be safe, a place to run away, or as Amber would say, a place to split. Now we get to cross-examination, and this is where Rottenborn really displays his rotten attitude. Now, I do have to say that this is standard for lawyers. So it's not necessarily a criticism of him personally. This is just how some lawyers behave. They get really hostile, aggressive, nasty, and snarky. And I believe, based on what I watched, that was the role that Rottenborn undertook. The cross-examination was all about drugs, 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 drugs. And Christine did not give. She kept repeating, no matter how many times Rottenborn tried to insinuate that she was agreeing that Johnny had drug issues, she kept saying, all I've ever known about was his pill addiction, his painkiller addiction, rather. And I think this was backed up by Dr. Kipper with Johnny's addiction to, opioids or opiates? One of them. I couldn't quite catch which one they were referring to. But boy, when I say Rottenborn really in every single question would say, so you agree that he has issues with drugs? And he's like, no, I just told you all I ever knew about and all I ever saw and all I ever witnessed and had knowledge of was an addiction to painkillers. Now, Johnny was also portrayed by Rottenborn as this angry person with behavioral issues, which, once again, Christine did not agree with. She said, no, he's this shy, lovely, peaceful person. Again, no one is claiming that he's perfect, but for the most part, everyone knew Johnny to be a gentleman. And, of course, the typical go-to, you're on his payroll, aren't you? There was quite a protracted discussion about this, a back and forth, because I don't know if Christine was misunderstanding him or just really standing her ground, but he kept saying, well, you have a financial interest in his business, don't you, as president of Infinitum Nile? And she kept saying, no, I'm a salaried employee. I don't have a stake in anything. And yeah, he was really trying to, again, paint this image to the jury that she will do and say anything because Johnny is basically her meal ticket. He's funding her existence. Now, specifically because she is his sister, it was quite a distasteful sparring match to witness from my end, because having brothers myself, you know, the love that one has for their siblings, assuming they have a good relationship, which Johnny and Christine really do seem to have, really transcends finances. You know, she did say that she would take care of him and worry about him and do everything she does as his personal manager to a less formal degree before he ever employed her, because she was his sister, his older sister, and she kept referring to him as my little brother. And clearly their bond is strong. So just hearing this, oh, this is about the money, isn't it, was quite distasteful. But again, Rottenborn was doing his job. You know, lawyers will hit beneath the belt and they will be dirty. They'll play dirty, especially if their client plays dirty, and it kind of sets the standard for them to follow. And the last point I want to mention in the cross-examination is that he used Johnny's Australia finger incident to demonstrate to the jury, or to try to convince the jury, that Christine is not a credible person and she will do anything to protect her brother, including lie, which means, of course, she would be lying on the stand. That's the insinuation. So it turns out that she instructed Johnny's team not to tell the press what happened to his finger, but she said that she even didn't know what happened to his finger at the time. She just didn't want that drama, that story breaking out at all. And so, unfortunately, that did involve, I suppose, to some extent lying, but to the press, to preserve Johnny's privacy, one would assume. I don't think the press has a right to know what happened to his finger. But trying to keep a personal argument, a personal event or incident private from the press is not the same as lying in a witness stand after making an oath in front of a jury. So again, incredibly dirty tactic, in my opinion, to show that she's sitting there and she's lying through her teeth to protect her brother. Now, in the redirect phase where Benjamin came back to kind of try to clean up the mess that Rottenborn left, unfortunately, a lot of his questions were successfully objected to on the grounds of hearsay. You'll see that Amber's team is actually really on the ball when it comes to their objections, at least in week 1, from what I've seen. A lot of their objections, specifically with Christine and in the earlier days, so not necessarily Dr. Anderson and Dr. Kipper. I think Dr. Kipper, a lot of their objections were overruled. But with Christine, there were a lot of objections that were sustained. So that means that Amber's team objected to the question and the judge agreed on the grounds of hearsay for the most part. So not much was done to recover, but that's assuming any damage was done. Now, in general, Christine's demeanor to me was not off-putting. You know, she's very similar to Johnny, actually. Again, I'd never seen her before, ever. Yeah, genetics are strong in that family, and she's so similar, even with her little, she has a quirk where she laughs sometimes, and you can tell it's not like she thinks it's funny, but Johnny does it a lot too. But I don't think she was a combative witness. I think she really stood her ground with her answers, which, if a lawyer's going to try to sway you and try to put a lie in your mouth and try to, basically twist your words, you have to stand your ground. Because if you don't, the jury's sitting right there observing everything. And they're going to think you're going along with what the opposing lawyer is saying, thereby helping the opponent's case. So standing your ground is not being a combative witness. I do want to say that. All right, next we move to Isaac Baruch. Now, he's famous now. We all know of him, and we, his clips have been circulating social media and the news. So I really urge you, if you're not going to watch anything, watch his testimony, both examination in chief and cross-examination. He might reappear as a witness. He hasn't been completely excused. He is not done. He might be recalled. So we might hear from him again. I have to tell you, if there was ever an amiable, disarming witness, it is Isaac Baruch. My goodness, there are just some people who are so likable. They're so disarming. And you just can't help but immediately take a liking to them. And he is that person. And I will wager that the jury felt the same way about him, because he was just so natural. It was like he thought he was having a discussion with a friend. He was just so, there was nothing in him that was rehearsed. There was nothing that was calculated. He is just pure honesty. He exudes it. That's exactly the kind of witness someone like Johnny needs, or anyone in Johnny's shoes needs. So in his examination in chief, they, again, elicited a story out of Isaac with regards to how he met Johnny and the nature of their friendship. And Isaac did a great job of displaying to the jury how generous and how selfless Johnny Depp is. There is this recurring theme from people in his life that you will notice where they all agree that he is one of the kindest, most helpful and selfless and generous people they had ever met. At one point, Isaac talked about how Johnny offered to become a patron of his because Isaac went on to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts and become an artist, and Johnny wanted to help him in that venture, and so he offered to set him up in the Eastern Columbia building in a penthouse, which is how he ended up there, on the condition that Isaac paints, so that one day he can have, a showing in an art gallery and actually sell his art. I could honestly go on and on and on about how generous Johnny was to Isaac, but again, I would urge you to listen to it straight from him. And say what you want to say. In my time on this planet, it's not difficult to learn that abusive people, it's not just one part of their life that they behave badly in. It permeates, It's not restricted to one aspect. They're just troubled or troublesome people in general. They have problematic personalities, They are combative, whatever it is. They're selfish. That's a very common trait. They're, it's all about them. So it's difficult to reconcile that, an abusive person with someone as generous and lovely and kind as Johnny Depp. That's why it's important that these witnesses paint that picture for the jury. It's not just character evidence. It's also evidence that I believe demonstrates to the jury how unlikely it is that Amber's allegations are true. So then Isaac is presented with a blueprint of the penthouse floor in the ECB. And again, this is where you really see just how natural he is, just how honest, everything flows. He doesn't think about what he has to say, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because it's all true. And he also seems to have a really good memory. He remembers things that many other witnesses don't, including, right down to what Amber was wearing. He would say, now that you mention it, I actually do remember what she was wearing. And he would give a description. I'm not saying it was spot on, but it was descriptive enough to demonstrate his credibility and his sharp memory. So using the blueprint, he describes to the jury, where he came in that night on the 21st of May with a friend, and he saw broken glass and he saw wine, like a puddle of wine. Then, most importantly, he talks about the next few days, because he sees Amber on the 22nd of May, on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. So basically the entire week leading up to the court appearance with the random mark on her face. He testifies that on the 22nd, and all of these days that I mentioned, he did not see a single mark on her face. He said it was just Amber looking like Amber. Just beautiful, perfect skin. On the 22nd, he even kissed her on where the bruise was meant to be from the phone, and she didn't flinch. She actually offered him her face and went, "Oh my God, can you see my bruises?" And he was like trying to look and was like, "No, maybe your beauty is outshining everything." He made a joke. But why would a person who put makeup on extend their face and ask someone that they know whether they can see bruises? If she had covered her face with makeup, or her bruises strategically with makeup, why ask if you can see them? And why kind of be boastful about it? "Oh, God, can you see my bruises?" Like as if it's something that, I don't know, is it something to be proud of? Because we talked about this in the last video I made on the topic. People don't go parading their bruises off to the press or to their friends and family. It's unfortunately a source of embarrassment and shame for actual victims, not a source of pride or a badge of honor. And so it's just so bizarre to me that she would even ask him if he could see. But he couldn't see. And he couldn't see anything on the 23rd of May. Again, very well lit. Johnny's lawyers made a very good job of making sure that every single day he was within 2 to 3 feet of her, he specified, And the area was very well lit. We're talking sunshine, not even just a dimly lit corridor, like actual natural light, bright light, and no makeup, as far as he knew. In cross-examination, of course, Elaine just latched on to the makeup issue because Isaac is a middle-aged man who doesn't know much about makeup, presumably, right? It's only natural. Elaine really kind of tried to hammer in this point that, well, how would you know she didn't have any makeup on? Did you ever watch her put on her makeup? Do you know? Do you really know for a fact that you always, every time you saw her, she didn't have any makeup on? What if she always had makeup on? You do realize she's an actress and a model. And then he goes, yeah, well, I've seen when she puts on makeup. It's only ever when she's going to an event. And this matches up with what Kate James says, which we'll get to next. He says, I lived with her for 3 years. We hung out. We basically lived together. We loved each other. And I've even seen her with a face mask on. I've seen her at her bare minimum, as in completely natural, rather, face. He said a lot. It was just Amber. I know what Amber looks like. And she didn't have any makeup on. But this is where the arnica cream joke came up. Elaine kept calling it Amica. And at one point, Isaac, bless his heart, burst out laughing because she kept asking him the same question about the Amica cream. Unfortunately, the judge, of course, again, understandably, she needs to maintain order in the court. And I'm not saying laughing out loud is disorderly, but you have to, there are standards. And so she immediately told him to stop laughing. And he was like, I'm sorry. But he was just yeah, as I said, very natural. There's nothing contrived about that man. He's walking credibility. But yeah, so Elaine, I think if there are any points they scored in that cross-examination, it's this concept of, well, how would you know she didn't strategically use arnica cream and covered up her bruises? How would you know? Were you there every morning when she applied her makeup? And he said no. They also made a point that she would be going out. When he saw her, at one point, she was going to a birthday party, so obviously she had makeup on. She wasn't about to get photographed by the paparazzi, as if they were crazy about her back then. Let's face it, prior to this fiasco happening, no one was chasing Amber Heard. No one was papping her. She was Johnny Depp's wife. Not that I like that. I don't like women being designated as someone's wife. Again, it's just a matter of fact. Of course, they touched on the rent-free. You owe Johnny, don't you? You owe him hundreds of thousands of dollars. He set you up for free and you never got to pay him back, etc., etc. They also accused him of being angry at Amber because he did say she knocked on his door at one point. I don't know if it was May or June of 2016. I think it was June, early June. And he told her, listen, after this hoax, after all these lies, these photos, he basically said that in front of the jury. He said, I want nothing to do with you. I want nothing to do with you. It's best that you and I stop talking. And speaking of that, he got emotional at one point. And he really kind of went off and no one stopped him. It was one of those powerful moments that, to be honest, are rare in trials, especially civil litigation. But he just was so, affected by what's happening to Johnny. Because he said, why? Such a good man. And his family, such a wonderful family. And why would you do this, Amber? And that's what really got him choked up. And of course, all of us who witnessed that also got choked up. I know I did. And yeah, importantly, no one interrupted him. No one. Not even Elaine. Although she did later refer to it as a rant. The jury got to see that. And the judge let him just let loose. It was one of the more powerful, if not the most powerful moment. At the end, I believe it was, I actually don't know if it was cross-examination or re-examination, he was asked if he would lie for Johnny. He quickly answered, no. He looked right at the jury and he was like, never. But then it was objected to. I don't remember on what grounds, but it was successfully objected to. So the objection was sustained, and the jury was instructed to not, to disregard that response, basically. But, it was said. The jury got to see his very natural, fluid, again, reaction. So you can't undo that. As much as the court says, disregard, it happened, whether for good or for bad. Brandon Patterson, everyone knows that, unfortunately, that was an incredibly dry and tedious deposition to get through. But the important factors is, number one, he verified that all the CCTV footage is authentic. But more importantly, he also explained finally why the footage of Whitney Heard pretending to punch Amber, and Isaac saw this video too. He saw it with his own eyes, and he got up. He actually asked if he could stand up, and he played it out to the jury. And he talked about how it was a joke. They were laughing, and Brandon, who obviously has nothing to do with Isaac, said the exact same thing in a much less animated way, of course. But he saw it too. Now, it was never preserved because neither side asked for its preservation. So what happened was Johnny's lawyers at the time and Amber's lawyers both submitted a list of all the footage that they wanted, and the punch wasn't one of them. I'm sure it was because they didn't know about it. But thankfully, we have two witnesses who have no relationship to each other saying the exact same thing. And this video was referenced in the opening statement. And Ben said, who would joke about that? If you were actually a victim of DV, who would joke about that? All right, I'm going to try to zoom past these because I am really getting short on time here. Kay James was the next witness. Now, she was quite aggressive in her approach. She was quite annoyed, like, the lawyers were an inconvenience to her. Like, this entire thing was an inconvenience to her. And I did worry that her attitude would rub off on the jury in the wrong way, because she is very, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to Australians, I live in Australia. She is very Australian. Australians can be very blunt, very in your face, very to the point, direct, and there really is a stark contrast to the Americans in the courtroom. I'm just being honest. It kind of reminded me of the culture shock I felt when I first came here as a child. I was very taken aback by how direct and how blunt Australians can be. Now I'm used to it. It's, the contrast was just because I was witnessing it, Kate James versus the demeanor of everyone else in the courtroom. But she was pretty much being her own lawyer almost. She was objecting basically as to relevance. She also objected on the basis of asked and answered, speculation. I was like, damn, girl, have you been, taking law classes on the side? The main issue with Kay James is I'm worried that her obvious distaste, her obvious dislike of Amber, rather, might taint her credibility in the jury's eyes. And they might think she has a bone to pick, which I think, based on how she alleges Amber treated her, she has every right to feel that way about Amber. I mean, if you look at it from another side, it's only going to prove how vile of a person Amber can be when you're hearing it not just from Johnny, you're hearing it from her ex-assistant. So it could work out in Johnny's favor. I don't know. But again, she was a difficult pill to swallow. She did mellow out when Johnny's team took over because the first half was Amber's side. And she became nicer when Johnny's team were asking her their questions. In general, her testimony was that Amber was an incredibly dramatic and angry person. Before she even knew she was dating Johnny Depp, basically. That's just how Amber was. And she said that whenever Amber complained, would be crying on the streets sometimes. She's just, again, very much borderline personality kind of behavior. It was always about her insecurities in the relationship, within the relationship with Johnny. It was never about how Johnny was treating her. Now, one thing that is a recurring theme that we will hear probably, because this is what we've heard in the UK, and Kate says this, is that with Amber, you always placate her. Christine said it too. Johnny's sister. she's such a problematic person that you just want to keep her happy. And we all have someone like this in our lives, don't we? Where it's just you're walking on eggshells and you want to make sure that they don't blow up. It's like a minefield. So Amber's side's goal was obviously, again, you're a disgruntled ex-employee. She terminated your employment when you were in financial strife, and you resented her for that. You wanted to live rent-free in one of their properties, and it never happened, so you resented her for that, which was true. She did try because she said everyone was doing it. She's just really, really honest as well. She was like, yeah, everyone was asking if everyone was living in Johnny's properties rent-free, so I tried too. But yeah, they just made it look like she was, again, was vengeful. She had a bone to pick. Now, one major sticking point, and I alluded to this when I was talking about this on social media, was that there was this text message Johnny sent her in 2016 where he referenced, Amber's flabby ass. And unfortunately, she says, I'm not sure if that's about Amber. I don't know. You're asking me to speculate. And then, I don't know if it was Rottenborn. I'm not sure. But one of Amber's lawyers said, yeah, but that's what you said in the UK in your transcripts when you testified. You said it was about Amber. And then she said, for whatever reason, this is why sometimes maybe you should get a lawyer. She said, I was just being agreeable in the UK as opposed to truthful. I mean, that's how I understood it. I think that's also how Amber's lawyer said it. It's like, so you, as opposed to being truthful, you're just being agreeable in court? And she kind of said, yeah, because I don't know if it's about Amber. So that is not good. Also, to answer, I got a lot of questions about whether they can reference the UK transcripts. Judicial proceedings or transcripts of judicial proceedings are one of the most reliable forms of evidence that can also trump the hearsay rule because they were not they're out of court statements because they weren't made in the Virginia courtroom, but they were made under oath or under affirmation. So there is this kind of higher value assigned to the transcripts of judicial proceedings. They're seen as very credible sources of evidence. So I know for a fact that domestically you can definitely reference the transcripts from other cases in other courtrooms. Internationally, I don't see why any exceptions would apply because it's the same concept of it was said either under oath or affirmation. There was no objection made when that was referred to in the footage. So, presumably, it was fine. Having said that, bear in mind, that means we can refer to Amber's testimony in the UK if there are any inconsistencies and go, but that's not what you said in the UK, was it? So, it can work out. Then Johnny's team took over. So, essentially, they asked her about the makeup as well. And she said Amber never wore makeup. And now this is coming from a woman, not just any woman, her personal assistant, who saw her naked a lot of the time. Speaking of that, they asked her, any bruises on her body, any hints of domestic violence or abuse? Nothing, not on her face, not on her body. And she would prance around her house naked. Kate said Amber had a proclivity for doing that. Now, she also said when she did ever put on her own makeup, it was very light. It was like eyelashes, maybe, nothing extreme. Amber was always a natural beauty, and she just didn't find the need to put on any makeup on. And again, this is from someone who would watch her apply. Because remember how Elaine asked Isaac, have you ever personally seen her apply her makeup? And he said no. Kate did. And so she knows, what Amber does, basically. She gave a glowing review of Johnny, just glowing. Just that he was a gentleman, never saw him get angry. He was always completely passive, very nice and kind to her son. He was not possessive or jealous. And in fact, Amber was the mean one who was verbally abusive and screaming, not just at Kate herself, but at others in front of her. And this includes her own sister, Whitney. So the way Kate described it is that she treated her sister like the dog that you kick. Almost verbatim. Amber was also apparently abusive to her late mother. This is according to Kate. And Kate also testified that Amber's mother told her personally that she was terrified of her own daughter, of Amber. Now, spitting in someone's face is a form of assault in Australia, or battery in the States, I believe, because it's physical contact. You're making physical contact with the person of another. Guess what? Amber spat in Kate James's face, according to Kate James's testimony, over salary negotiations. And this was witnessed by a handyman called Hector, and he was appalled. Kate also testified that Amber took, I'm not sure what the drug was called, but it was not Accutane. It was the other drug. It was pro something. And apparently she suffered manic episodes as side effects. And she also testified that Amber told her, I don't think she ever witnessed her do it, but Amber told her that she took illicit drugs. So, you're going to play the drug game? We'll play the drug game. All right, very quickly moving on to Dr. Anderson. I'm really running short on time here. This psychologist, I believe she was a psychologist, was a bit of, I suppose, a problem for Johnny's side. Again, it's mainly because she would talk about, or she would write down things Amber told her. Amber told her that Johnny abused her, but she never said this in Johnny's presence because they had separate sessions and couple sessions. And in their solo one-on-one sessions is when Dr. Anderson would hear about Johnny's alleged abuse. So he was never there in the room to tell her his side of the story or to even contradict Amber's allegations. So she only ever heard it from Amber, and she wrote this down. And this is the part that got to a lot of people. She would read out her report as if it was the truth. The lawyers made a good job of specifying, Amber told you this and you never witnessed it, did you? She's like, yeah, I never saw anything. And she told you this when Johnny was not in the room. Yep. In fact, Johnny couldn't get a word in edgewise whenever they were having their couple sessions together. She said Johnny was really overwhelmed by Amber's jackhammer style of talking. She would cut him off, never gave him a chance to talk. When he was alone, she described him as an incredibly articulate and intelligent man who was actually quite talkative if you actually just don't interrupt him. And the camera panned over to Johnny at that time when she said that, and he laughed. Now, another problem that came up in this testimony is the mutual abuse statement. So basically, both of them are instigators. Both of them are to blame. Both of them initiate. Now, of course, this is bad news for Johnny. And again, I do believe that she's basing this primarily, or if not solely, on what Amber would tell her one-on-one. But the thing is, this is where Amber looks like a liar. Amber said she only ever hit Johnny once in defense of her sister on the staircase after his finger incident. According to Dr. Anderson, she would initiate physically multiple times. Amber would rather strike him than let him leave. Now, to me, this sounds like evidence that goes against her version of events, which is I only ever touched him once. We have that in video form in her deposition from 2016 when she was eating. So that contradicts it. She also said that there was one time, when he was incoherent because he was allegedly under the influence. This was around the time his mother was incredibly ill in hospital. And Amber just slapped him because he was incoherent. So it wasn't in self-defense. It wasn't, I don't even know why, honestly. Was it provoked? He was mumbling incoherently. She also admitted to slapping him once because she was offended by something he said. And she admitted to Dr. Anderson that she threw a can at him once. Which sounds very familiar to me because I believe that was an incident in the Bahamas, wasn't it? Over Christmas in December 2015, she threw paint at him, or a can of paint, something like that. Even if it's not the same incident, it just shows that she has a pattern of behavior. Now, the troubling point here is Amber went to see Dr. Anderson on the 17th of December 2015 after the James Corden show and after that incident preceding the James Corden show. And Dr. Anderson actually says that she saw bruises that were around that big under her eyes specifically. And she saw the photos as well, but the lawyers also made it clear that this, she never witnessed anything directly. Still, I think this is problematic unless Johnny's team do a great job of showing how far Amber would go to fake injuries or even to, hit herself. We've all seen it in Gone Girl, which I know is based on a book, but then I came across this real life story of a Gone Girl copycat, which this woman does the exact same thing and basically hits herself and tells her ex-boyfriend to hit her. It's crazy. People are crazy out there. There are crazies out there who will do anything to further their narrative. I don't have the proof. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if Amber hit herself. I'm not even saying that the bruises were fake. Maybe they were real, but has anyone ever considered they could be self-inflicted? People do it all the time. This is problematic, I'm not gonna lie. They must be able to convince the jury that Amber faked it, whether it was through makeup or self-inflicted injuries. I wonder if it will be easier to just argue that it's makeup. It's always just been makeup. Because the day after she appeared in court, on the 28th of May 2016, she was laughing with Raquel and she was papped, makeup-free, clearly makeup-free, with not a single mark on her face. So it's like this moving, migrating, disappearing mark. So that's what Johnny's team, in my opinion, needs to do. It's not about denying the presence of these bruises, but explaining them and absolving Johnny in the process. With Gina, unfortunately, we all know she was dismissed because of the fact that she admitted to watching clips from the trial. All I will say is she didn't say anything that Johnny can't do without. I really want people to calm down. Honestly, her testimony, Johnny can live without it. Johnny can win the case without it. But I will say, and I'll bring it up here, that Eve has been permanently kicked out of court, essentially. So she has been removed or excluded for the rest of the trial. For those of you who don't know who she is, I didn't know who she is. All I know is that she was very vocal and active on Twitter as a pro Amber Heard supporter. She calls herself a journalist. I don't know if she actually is, but she was caught texting throughout the trial, like throughout the past week. And to me, as a lawyer, I was completely confused by that whenever, I noticed her sitting there, but she was always looking down at her phone. And that is completely, I thought Virginia's rules were different because for us in Australia, that is completely not allowed, especially if you're communicating on social media with the outside world while you're in a courtroom. Completely prohibited. So the fact that no one stopped her until Johnny filed for her removal, basically, after she outed Gina, because basically she was on her phone and then she alerted someone sitting next to her. It's all caught on camera. And then she sends it to Rottenborn, and he's on his phone for a while Gina's testifying. And then he stands up and goes, "Your Honor." And then that's when the judge asks her if she watched, and she was honest and said, "Yeah, I did." Now, to be fair, I am really confused about why she wasn't instructed adequately by Johnny's team not to do that. Because as a witness to a trial, you are not allowed to know what's going on in that courtroom until you have completed your testimony. So with Isaac, because he's subject to recall, basically they might recall him, he can't get on social media and watch clips and, update himself because he might still have to testify. This is standard procedure. That's why I'm so kind of confused about how Gina wasn't appropriately instructed by Johnny's team. It's a mistake. It's human. Maybe they really didn't expect her, but this is the thing with witnesses. You should never assume they know procedure, They don't know. So I don't know if they instructed her or not. And I'm going to assume she just didn't know any better. And it was an honest mistake that she completely admitted to. And there's nothing that can be done about it. All right, finally now, Dr. Kipper, and I do apologize if this is a long video, but it is meant to be a weekly recap. I will see if I can split it up into parts. It doesn't make sense. I'm not going to split it up. Essentially, he confirmed that Johnny only really sought treatment for his dependence on, again, I don't know if it's opioids or opiates. Now, Dr. Kipper also said that when it comes to Johnny, mood swings means depression and sadness, but never anger, because Amber's team tried to make it out that oh, he had mood swings, you know, he was prone to anger, wasn't he? And Dr. Kipper said, no, it was never really, you know, Johnny's not an angry person. Again, the focus was on drugs. Johnny tested positive for cocaine, didn't he? For cannabinoids or amphetamines, everything. And, you know, Dr. Kipper was quite straightforward and said yes. There were a number of reports of aggressive behavior on set with verbal arguments, but Dr. Kipper confirmed, and I think he really stood his ground on this one, that it was just words. Johnny only used his words. It was a disagreement with the director. Things never got physical with Johnny. And there was a report from Debbie Lloyd, the nurse, that Johnny at one point, his knuckles were bloody because he punched a kitchen board, I don't know, whiteboard, something. But again, an inanimate object. This came up in the UK. Johnny Depp, the kitchen beater, is not Johnny Depp, the wife beater. The issue here for Johnny are the texts where Johnny writes that he injured his own finger in Australia. Now, we all know that he covered for Amber because, well, we all know based on what Johnny says because we weren't there. And I think this was one of those mistakes. But, you know, when you're a victim, if you still love your partner, you want to cover for them. That's just... Women are known to do it all the time. It's an accepted thing in society that women who are abused by their husbands are known to cover for them. And that's why sometimes the police will still arrest the husband or still get a restraining order, even if the woman backs off and goes, no, I never wanted to press charges. I just wanted to scare him. They don't care. They go and proceed based on what they've witnessed. Why isn't the same afforded to a man? You know, why is that notion so foreign when you flip the genders? Is it impossible, really, for a male victim to be so in love with his perpetrator that he covers for them in that moment? Is it really that far-fetched? So I really hope that Johnny's team take that route and just go, women do it all the time. It's time we accept that men do it too. Because they're humans too. They fall in love too. They want to protect their abuser too. It shouldn't be such a foreign concept. And finally, just to wrap things up, another problematic point for Johnny's team to have to deal with is texts from Johnny to Dr. Kipper where he says, Amber and I have been doing so good because I locked away my monster child. This coincides with her story of, Johnny has the monster side of him, this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation where there's the nice, charismatic Johnny that we see, in public, but then there's the dark Johnny. And yeah, those texts, again, Johnny's probably just innocently referring to, the ugly side of him that we all have. No one's perfect. We all have our unfortunate moments, bad habits, moments of aggression that don't necessarily extend to physical violence or abuse. So again, I don't necessarily think that automatically proves that her allegations are true. But it's unfortunate that it's in text message form. And I lied. I said this was the last point. But one more point is you'll see a recurring theme. Again, it came up a lot with Dr. Kipper that Johnny's language is very colorful in text messages. He says things that are very kind of, I suppose, dramatic, fantastical, almost like a story writer. He's very creative even in his texts, but not always in the best light. He uses certain language and certain descriptors that are quite violent. But again, how does that prove that he has the propensity to be physically violent towards his wife? I don't think that establishes the necessary nexus, in my opinion. So again, I'm hoping Johnny's team really hammers in that point to the jury. It's like, yeah. They did in the opening statements. It's like, yeah, his language is inappropriate. Does that mean he's abusive? No. All right. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm sorry if it was long. I really tried to make this as brief as possible, brevity. But it was just too much. It was too much. And I'm assuming they're going to be just as long every week. So I will timestamp them. And I hope you all find the summary informative. To be fair, every day runs for 7 to 8 hours. So whatever I give you is still a summary, even if it's a long one. But I don't think it's possible to give you a shorter one without really skipping details, a lot of details. So let me know what you all think as usual. Also, my cat's fur is like everywhere in the atmosphere. So if you see me scratching my nose, then it's because I can't get rid of it. So, all right. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Fingers crossed for Johnny. I am hooked, as I knew I would be, but I am just, it's a problem because I have to study, I have to maintain my house, I have to work. But yeah, I just can't miss a single moment. So yeah, I'm sure you all know how I feel. All right, take care. See you next time. Bye.